Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into something pretty amazing today. The IL-1 family signaling pathway.
Oh, yeah. It's a fascinating one.
We've got this super interesting article you sent over from Assay Genie.
Unraveling the molecular orchestra of immune regulation.
That title, right? IL-1 family signaling. Unraveling the molecular orchestra of immune regulation. It really makes you think about all this intricate stuff happening inside us all the time. And thankfully, we've got you here to break it all down for us.
Happy to help.
So, you've clearly been reading up on this. We can skip the whole, inflammation 101 thing.
Right.
But what really stands out, maybe for you too, is this idea of control, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, these IL-1 family members are powerful signaling molecules, but too much, and things could go haywire.
Oh, for sure. It's like a delicate dance, really.
The article uses this term cleaved when it talks about how IL-1 is activated. Like it needs permission to go do its thing.
Right. So think of it this way. IL-1, it's kind of like a potent weapon, but it starts off locked up.
Okay.
It's in this inactive form, pro-IL-1, and can't do much until it gets cleaved. Basically, it's cut into its active form.
Interesting.
And this cleaving is done by an enzyme, caspase-1, but even that is tightly controlled by something called the inflammasome.
Oh, wow. So it's like a multi-step security system.
Exactly. This inflammasome, it's like a sensor.
Yeah.
Always on, looking for any signs of danger.
Oh, makes sense.
And only when there's a real threat, like a bacterial infection, will it activate caspase-1, which then activates IL-1.
Wow, our bodies are so smart.
They really are.
So we've got this powerful weapon, IL-1, locked away until it's really needed. But the article also mentions other IL-1 family members, IL-18, IL-33.
Yeah.
Do they need to be cleaved too?
Now, that's where things get even more interesting. Each one of these cytokines, they have their own unique ways of being regulated.
Yeah.
IL-33, for example, doesn't need cleaving. Instead, it's controlled at the transcriptional level.
Transcriptional level.
Meaning the body carefully controls when and how much of the IL-33 gene is even read to make the cytokine.
Oh, so it's like different levels of security clearance depending on the situation.
Exactly. It shows just how adaptable our immune system is.
This is already blowing my mind.
It's pretty cool stuff.
But why go through all this trouble? Why so many different control mechanisms for these cytokines?
Well, you got to remember, these cytokines are really powerful. They can trigger a whole cascade of events that leads to inflammation,
Right.
which is good. We need inflammation to fight infections, to heal.
Yeah.
But if it's not controlled, it can cause a lot of damage. So these different mechanisms let the body fine-tune the response.
So it's about preventing, friendly fire.
Exactly.
Making sure the immune response is strong enough to deal with a threat, but not so strong that it hurts the body itself.
Right on. It's a balance, a testament to how complex and sophisticated our immune system really is.
The article gets into all these details about the receptors involved in this pathway.
Yeah.
Like IL-1R1, IL-1ST2. What's the deal with all these different receptors? Does each one activate a totally different response?
Okay. So think of receptors like doorways on the surface of our cells. Each one is designed to bind to a specific cytokine, like a lock and key.
Interesting.
And this binding triggers a signaling pathway inside the cell.
I see.
So yeah, different receptors can lead to different outcomes, but there's also some overlap between the pathways.
I remember reading about two main pathways, MAPK dependent and TRIF dependent.
Right. Those are key.
What are they actually doing,
Yeah.
and how are they different?
Okay, picture this. You have a house with two different alarm systems. One's for fire, the other for intruders.
Okay.
Both can be triggered on their own, but they can also interact with each other. That's kind of how MAPK and TRIF work.
Gotcha. So two different pathways, two different responses. What are they responding to?
Okay. MAPK, that's like your rapid response team.
Got it.
When a cytokine like IL-1 binds to its receptor, it sets off this MAPK pathway. It quickly activates those pro-inflammatory signals, mainly through NFPB and MAPK. Think of it like the initial alarm, getting those immune defenses ready to go.
Oh, so it's like the first line of defense.
Exactly. Get those troops rallied quick.
Yep.
Now, Tirschea, that one's a bit more nuanced.
Okay.
It can be triggered by different cytokines, some even outside the IL-1 family. It can induce interferons, which are super powerful antiviral molecules.
Wow.
And it can also activate anti-inflammatory signals.
So one pathway ramps up the attack and the other fine-tunes things. Maybe even dampens the response.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Like having an accelerator and a brake pedal, lets the body adjust how intense and how long the immune response lasts.
Now, this is all starting to make sense, but I have to ask, what does this all mean practically? Why should we care about these pathways?
That is the million-dollar question, and that's where it gets really interesting, because understanding these pathways is key to understanding how our immune system works, and more importantly, how it can go wrong.
Right.
When this IL-1 family signaling pathway gets messed up, it's been linked to a whole bunch of diseases. Chronic inflammation, autoimmune disorders.
Right.
And that's what we're going to dig into next time. So we've been talking about this IL-1 pathway, and it's all about balance.
Right.
Too much, and you get chronic inflammation. Too little, and you might be more likely to get infections. And then there's the whole other thing with autoimmune diseases, where it seems like the immune system gets confused and attacks the body.
Yeah. That's what always gets me. Like, how can our own defenses turn against us? The article mentions these autoimmune disorders. I know we touched on it earlier, but can we dig into that more? What's the connection with the IL-1 pathway and these conditions?
Yeah, for sure. And it is kind of mind-boggling, isn't it? Imagine your immune system is like a security force protecting a city. Ideally, they're there to find threats, neutralize them, things like, invading pathogens. But in autoimmunity, it's like some of these security forces, they start attacking the city itself. Buildings, power grids, the whole thing.
Wow, so the city's under siege from its own protectors.
Exactly. Chaos everywhere. So how does the IL-1 pathway fit into this?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
Well, let's look at rheumatoid arthritis, for example. I'm sure you've heard of it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
A chronic inflammatory disease that mainly affects the joints. It's super painful, really debilitating.
And pretty common, too. So where does the IL-1 family come in?
Well, research has shown that IL-1, remember that potent cytokine? It's significantly higher in the joints of people who have rheumatoid arthritis. Like it's sending out these constant distress signals, calling all those inflammatory cells to the joints, and that's what causes all the damage.
Oh, wow. So it's not just there. It's like actively making the inflammation worse.
Exactly. And that's why blocking IL-1 has become such a big deal for treating rheumatoid arthritis. Like, cutting off communication for those out-of-control security forces. Back to our city analogy.
So like going in and stopping the problem at the source.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier that there are already drugs that target IL-1.
Yeah. It kind of feels like science fiction to me.
It's pretty amazing what we can do these days. One approach is to use these monoclonal antibodies. They're basically engineered proteins designed to specifically bind to and neutralize IL-1.
So they're like, what? Capturing the cytokine before it can cause trouble?
Yeah, exactly. Intercepting those distress signals.
Cool.
Another approach is to use soluble receptors. These are kind of like decoy receptors. They bind to IL-1, but they stop it from reaching its target on the cells.
So we're either disarming the messenger or sending it to the wrong address. That's so cool. Like, how do scientists even figure that out?
It's pretty incredible, right?
Okay, but rheumatoid arthritis is just one example. Are there other autoimmune diseases where IL-1 is involved?
Oh, tons. It pops up in a surprising number of them, like inflammatory bowel disease, or IBD for short. That includes Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis.
Right, those are serious conditions that affect the digestive system, right?
Right. IBD is basically chronic inflammation in the digestive tract. Leads to a whole host of not fun symptoms: abdominal pain, diarrhea, weight loss.
Oh, sounds awful.
It is. And while we're still figuring out the exact causes, it seems to involve a bunch of factors: genetics, environmental triggers, and yep, you guessed it, an overactive immune response.
And I bet IL-1 fits in there somewhere.
You bet. Studies have shown that, similar to rheumatoid arthritis, IL-1 is higher in those inflamed tissues in people with IBD. So again, it seems to be amplifying and just like keeping that inflammatory response going.
It's like a common thread between all these different autoimmune diseases.
It really is. It's becoming clearer and clearer that the IL-1 pathway is central to a lot of inflammatory and autoimmune conditions. But here's where it gets really interesting. Even a condition like gout, which you might not think of as an autoimmune disease, is heavily influenced by IL-1.
Gout. Isn't that the one that, like, kings used to get?
That's the one. Often associated with a pretty fancy lifestyle, but it's super painful.
Oh, I bet.
Basically, gout is caused by a buildup of uric acid crystals in the joints.
Okay.
And these crystals trigger a big inflammatory response. And guess what? Cytokine is heavily involved in that response.
Oh, I'm going to guess IL-1.
Bingo. It's like those uric acid crystals set off the alarm, and IL-1 comes rushing in, making those inflammatory signals even stronger, causing all that pain, the redness, the swelling. It's really amazing how one molecule can do so much in so many different conditions.
It really is. It makes you think about how everything in in our bodies is connected. So understanding this IL-1 pathway, it's not just some abstract biology thing. It actually has a real impact on how we treat these diseases.
Absolutely. And that brings us to some really exciting new developments in the field, which we'll dive into
Oh,
after.
I guess that means we're out of time for this segment. We'll pick up right where we left off in the next part of our deep dive. Okay, so we've spent a lot of time on like what happens when this IL-1 pathway goes wrong, but what can we actually do about it? Like what's the future of targeting this pathway for new treatments and stuff?
Yeah, that's the exciting part. We've already seen some pretty amazing results with those IL-1 inhibitors for certain conditions, but the field is always moving forward. One of the really cool areas is developing even more targeted therapies.
So we talked about blocking IL-1, but can we get even more specific than that?
Oh, absolutely. Remember how we were talking about those different signaling pathways downstream of IL-1?
Like MID88 and TRIF?
Right. Those guys. So instead of just broadly blocking the cytokine itself, researchers are looking at ways to target those specific pathways.
So instead of like shutting down the whole communication system, we could like target specific messages.
Exactly. It's all about being more precise, less off-target effects, and potentially, making the treatments even more effective.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Left collateral damage. It sounds like we're moving toward like personalized medicine.
You got it. That's another huge area of research right now, this idea of tailoring treatments to each person's genetic and molecular profile.
That sounds so futuristic. How would that even work?
Okay, imagine this. You go to the doctor and you have some symptoms that might point to an autoimmune disease.
Okay.
Now, instead of just giving you like a standard treatment, the doctor takes a deeper look.
Uh-huh.
They analyze your genes, the specific molecules involved in your condition, and from that, they can predict how you'll respond to different IL-1 inhibitors or other therapies.
Wow. So we could avoid all those unnecessary treatments and side effects and maybe even get better results.
Right. It's about maximizing the good stuff, minimizing the bad.
This is incredible. It feels like we're on the edge of some like major changes in healthcare. Are we close to actually seeing this personalized approach in practice?
It's still early, I'd say, but things are moving fast. The advances in like genomics and bioinformatics are making it easier to analyze all that complex biological data.
It's pretty amazing to think that one day we could have treatments that are specifically designed for each patient. It really makes you realize how far we've come in understanding how the immune system works. You mentioned earlier that there's some cool research going on with IL-1 signaling in neuroinflammatory diseases.
Oh, yeah, definitely. That's an area I'm super excited about.
Me too. Tell me more.
Okay, so neuroinflammatory diseases are those conditions where the immune system, for some reason, starts attacking the nervous system, leads to all this inflammation in the brain and spinal cord.
Oh, wow. That sounds serious. Like, what kind of conditions are we talking about?
Well, there's multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, some really big challenges.
For sure. So where does the IL-1 pathway fit in?
Well, the latest research is suggesting that IL-1 and some of its other family members might actually be contributing to the inflammation and damage to the neurons that happens in these diseases.
Oh, I see. So if we could somehow like tone down that inflammatory response, could we potentially slow down or even prevent these diseases?
That's the hope. It's super complex, but there are already clinical trials testing IL-1 inhibitors for these neuroinflammatory conditions.
It's amazing to think that what we're learning about this one signaling pathway could have such a huge impact on human health.
It really shows you the power of basic research, and how all these biological systems are connected.
Wow, I gotta say this deep dive has been incredible. I feel like I have a whole new appreciation for the IL-1 family signaling pathway.
Me too. It's a super fascinating field with so much potential to improve people's lives.
And to our listeners, thank you so much for coming along with us on this journey. We hope you've enjoyed exploring this amazing, intricate world inside all of us.
It's been a pleasure diving deep with you.
Keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep exploring the wonders of science. We'll see you next time.